10x your service design offering with Smaply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smaply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smaply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Welcome to This Is HCD, the podcast that explores the world of human-centred design, service innovation and the power of empathy. I'm your host, Gerry Scullion, and in today's episode we're joined by Kate Tarling, a leader in the world of service design. Kate shares her journey and expertise, diving deep into the importance of user research, building empathy and fostering communities within organisations. Now, we explore the evolution of service design within the United Kingdom and the challenges faced in government services and how metrics should guide rather than dictate decisions. Kate offers practical tips for driving immediate improvements and managing silos effectively, as well as insights into the future of service design and design leadership. She emphasises that it plays a critical role in ensuring that a human-centred approach is at the centre and at the heart of any organisational change. But before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, and that's Smaply. Smaply is my go-to tool for customer journey mapping in collaboration with organisations. It allows teams to work together in real time to create, refine and manage user journeys all in one place, ensuring that you never lose sight of your customer needs. I've been using it for over a decade. I think you should check it out today, folks. Now, let's dive straight into this insightful conversation with Kate Tarling. Kate, I'm delighted to have you on the show. Long time admirer, first time or second time, maybe third time speaking. And I'm delighted to have you on the show because we've got a lot of mutual friends. But maybe for our listeners who aren't familiar with your work, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and what you do.
Would love to. And it's a pleasure to chat with you today. So I'm Kate Tarling. I live in the centre of the UK in Sheffield, and I've had a varied career, I suppose. From in the sort of early days in the 2000s, I was running sort of operational services, being thrown in at the deep end, and then later on, looked into more getting into human-centred design because it seemed to be an entirely sensible focus if you want a successful product or service, that you need to figure out what people actually need and what makes a difference to them. And these days I run an organisation, the Service Org Group, and we tend to work with organisational leadership, helping them to understand what it involves to be a good service provider, and removing some of the blocks and barriers that are typically in the way. So things like how governance and decision making works, how funding works, how reporting and planning work or don't work, how long or how hard it is to get a piece of work initiated and kind of going through, and how that's measured and thought about. So it's really about creating the conditions for good services to happen.
Yeah. You just mentioned Lou Downs' book, Good Services. Are you joking?
I often do.
I know, yeah. And Lou's been on the show, and, you know, a long time friend. And, you know, I put what you wrote last year, which came out last year, and this is the book here, folks, who haven't seen it, it's The Service Organisation. If you're listening on the podcast, of course you can watch this on YouTube. But The Service Organisation came out after Lou's work, and I can see there's a lot of dovetailing going on between that book and Good Services, especially when you're talking about the work that you do with organisations and governments. Maybe talk us through some of the steps and how you would kind of approach that space with organisational leaders who are taking their first steps into service orientated kind of approaches to projects. How do you start that off? Like, you know, how do you define those parameters?
Yeah, really good question. And I think, to be fair, there's always like really great work that's usually already underway in those organizations. It's not, no one's sort of starting from nothing. There's often the places I'm going in, there's brilliant human-centered design teams already doing good stuff. There are digital delivery teams, prototyping, iterating, learning as they go. So there's always that context. However, it's like the rest of the organization looks at it as if it's something other and different and not really anything to do with them. So whether that's operational teams or other parts of leadership or enforcement or compliance or all of those other areas. So although there's always really good stuff happening, it's just as a whole, the organization isn't necessarily doing all that it could. So I think the first step is often just setting out what it looks like, because for most people it's like, well, we're doing great stuff, like we're fighting the fires, we're doing the best we can with not very much resources, so it's about awareness of what it can look like, and also for organizations that are a bit like them as well, so not sort of painting some unachievable standard from some organization that was only existed from 5 years ago, and of course then get to like benefit from contemporary ways of working. But organizations like yours that have existed for hundreds of years, what are they doing? What kinds of things are happening now that are a bit different to what they're happening for you? We sometimes do a sort of organizational assessment, which is really about looking at different areas. These are typically the things that need to change. What's going on for you? What's that look like? And then usually just starting somewhere or strengthening work that's already happening somewhere. So picking one whole service and actually putting in place some of the habits, ways of working and things that are going to help everybody work together better across it. Something like that.
One of the things that I remember in our email, kind of ramping up for this episode, you said you don't really consider yourself a service designer. And that's, depending on how you frame it, I think that can be a superpower. Talk to me about what's going on inside your head around how you position yourself and why you don't consider yourself a service designer.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that I have been, and it's about sort of the kind of work that I do. Yeah, certainly when I was working on, a service or a set of services within an organisation, very much looking at the design of it, what we know about our customers, users, the humans involved, staff members, and so on, and looking at what can we do to kind of make things work better. Yeah, I think because these days, it's less about the design of any one service and it's about the design of the organisation, the habits, what goes on around all of its services, that it doesn't quite fall into that same category, although everything I say is entirely relevant to service designers. So it's not exactly trying to separate. But it gets really into the heart of operations, actually, the sort of big operational areas of government or of organizations. So it's got as much to do with operations, with what goes on in contact centers, with leadership decisions, with the boards, with influence of non-executives, as it has to do with design, as we might think of it. And of course, the whole thing adds up to how well the service works. So it's all part of it.
I'm just holding a mirror up here. I'm just holding a mirror up. And you're like, I'm not really, but I know I tick every single one of those boxes as a service designer. But it's funny, like a lot of people I speak to, people who've written books as well, like they'd say, like, I don't really think of myself as a service designer. And it's really interesting for me to hear yet another story, another perspective on it. What's causing that? Like, because at its core, you are doing all the elements of a service designer, and you're helping the organization get better at thinking and reshaping how they deliver services. But in your mind, what is a service designer then, in that question?
I think it's just about the focus of work and at any given time. So if you think of service design as about designing services, depending on where you're at. So I think sometimes coming in from a consultancy is quite different, as we know, to working in-house as a service designer. But the work tends to focus on a service or some common element that runs across services. It's quite sort of instrumental in the actual experience, the success of a service. And yes, we know you can't, where do you draw the boundaries then because of decision making and everything else? So yeah, not to split hairs about it, but my God, you could call it a management consultancy or leadership, like organization design. It's all really.
Yeah. I mean, I was traveling a couple of weeks ago and I was working with Mark Stickthorne on this project, and we he doesn't call himself a service designer, and the argument there is like if you're working in an organization and they say, hey, this is business consultancy, I'm not going to argue with them and say, well, actually I'm a service designer and stuff.
I don't really... Let me now spend half an hour talking to you about
yeah, and I'm sure you're pretty much the same. Like it's I mean, and I would have in times past, I would have been, well, actually, I'm what's known as a I wouldn't get into that. So I'd focus mostly on the work. I mean, that's the most important thing for us,
And also, like these days, my answer would be, I'm the CEO of an organization. Like, that's what I do.
Yeah, at the moment. You're in your own space.
And if I'm in a taxi and somebody asks me, I generally say I build websites, just because.
Oh, really?
Depends on where you go.
Oh man, I hate that question. I've become that person when I'm traveling or doing anything. Go, what do you do? I'm like, oh man, that's social anxiety. It's room 101. It's going straight in there. I never know what to say.
What do you say? Experience this, but
websites.
So I say it depends. It depends what's going on. It depends what mood I'm in, whether I actually want to have a genuine conversation or whether I'm a bit tired and I don't. Yeah. To be fair. But it's also, I don't know if you have this, in some friends of yours, like if you're in a gathering and someone says, hey, Gerry, what do you do? Yeah. And some friends of yours step in and tell them what you do and other friends have no idea. So I noticed 100%. This. I've got a couple of friends who actually can explain what I do and others have no idea.
Interesting. So I had this exact thought process on Saturday night. So one of my really good friends, my former boss, would you believe, when I worked in Australia at Cochlear, it was my first service design project. He came over to visit and he stayed in our house for the weekend, and I took him to Galway. And one of my other friends from my times past when I was young, free and single and known as Scully was my nickname, like wild kind of days. And he doesn't know anything about my design career. And we sat down, the three people at the table. So one over here, former boss, knows exactly what I can do as a designer. And the other one is just like, you're not drinking anymore. Why not? Why aren't you drinking? Where's Fun Scully gone? And I'm like, Fun Scully's gone to bed and he's not getting up for the rest of my life. Like, that's it. Fun Scully's over, okay? And he was like, so you're not doing any of the design anymore? And I go, no, I am doing design, but I'm not doing website stuff. It's mainly training these days that I do. Couldn't get his head around it. So it's not logos, it's not branding. So depending on the part of, wherever people know me from school or from university, I guess I've evolved an awful lot from, over the last 20, 25 years. Anyone from those days, they don't know what I do. The people who've worked with me will obviously be ex-clients or whatever it is. They kind of know what we do. What about you? Would your friends, you said some of your friends do know what they do. How do they describe it? I want to hear that one.
Can I phone a friend?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey.
50-50.
I have a friend who's a pediatric consultant and she can do a pretty good job at explaining what I do.
Yeah.
And I think it's those that it probably resonates more with them because the people that I know who work in large organizations, like she's obviously in frontline service delivery.
100%.
So experiences directly how the hardness of sort of working in an institution and kind of the obvious things that should just be easy to do or that you could do for your patients that are so hard for reasons, or the handovers involved that really get in the way of good sort of just treatment of patients, treatment of people. So I suspect there's a correlation between people who instinctively get what you do when they're working in the places that you typically go in and work with.
Healthcare workers are perfect. I mean, they are change makers 101. They control a small amount of space around their experience, but they get it. I said, if you want to make improvements to increase, chances of recovery or better overall kind of satisfaction, that's kind of work that I would do. That's straight away that they get it. And they're really interested. I don't know what it is about people working in airports or hospitals. They're really complex ecosystems, but they get service design, in my experience. It's just kind of native to them in some ways, like, I don't know why that is. Do you have any thoughts on why people in hospitals, what's driving that?
I think it might be coming back to where I was talking about earlier, in that I don't exactly see myself as a service designer, and it's nothing to do with what service designers do, because they do everything and get involved in everything. I think it's more because it can be a bit othering to the people who are already in the service, working on the service, doing their best to hold things together. Like they are often, particularly with healthcare, like a one-person service where they're getting on the phones to try and connect a social care thing with a something else thing with a something else thing. Like they are doing it. So if you imagine, like in some situations, you imagine you've got this consultancy team that comes in and does some user research to tell you what's wrong with the service and then tells you how to improve it. And they're like, do you think I don't know? I just have no time to do a thing about it.
Absolutely.
So it's, I think it comes back to that. Oh gosh, it's not for lack. It's not always, but it's often not for lack of not knowing things are not working so well. It's all of the things in the way of people being able to do something about it. Yeah.
I mean, hospitals for me are a great example of a service organization, which is to, requote, your book. Talk to me about the origin of the book, because I know you've had an interesting career, and I'd love to hear more around the work that you did with GDS and Gov.uk, and you worked at Lou, didn't you? You worked at Lou in whereabouts in the government.
In a few places. And, Lou was pretty instrumental about getting services and service design really talked about and taken really seriously in government, which has just been phenomenal, like the impacts of that over time. And
I had breakfast yesterday, by the way, just as a disclaimer, with Trisha Doyle, who was like, "Oh, Kate is amazing. Kate, oh," and I was like,
"Trisha's awesome."
I said, "Calm down, Kate. Calm down, Trisha. Like, Kate's cool. All right, let's talk about me for a minute."
There's a lot of mutual respect going on everywhere among us all, I think.
I mean, I don't know what it is, but a lot of the GDS crew, all of the people that have come out of there, like Sarah Winters, like there's so many people that have done so much good work since leaving the GDS and Gov.uk and all of the other various parts of the government that they're working in. And we were mentioning there Catherine in the NHS before we started speaking. It seems that there's been a renaissance happening in the UK over the last 20 years as regards services and service design. What do you think is underpinning all of this? Where is this coming from as regards, I know Frances Maud, I think it was the person that started the GDS, wasn't that right?
I was certainly closely involved. Yeah.
Something closely involved.
Yeah.
But there's been so much incredible work come out of the UK in the last 20 years. And I include, obviously, the service organisation in that as well, and yourself. How did all that happen? Because I know there's people in other parts of the world who really want to improve government services. They want to improve talent across the organisation. But it just seems that maybe it's my own kind of perspective and how I'm looking at the UK and the people I get to know. But it seems something has happened really positively over the last 20 years across the UK as regards design. What are your thoughts on that?
So definitely true. And I think others look on and just sort of see we have a maturity about it, particularly folks in the States to notice the difference. I think certainly in government there was a significant report by Martha Lane Fox, and with support of Frances Maud and then others. There was a big groundswell in doing government services better for sure, and with the influence of various individuals across the way, I think that momentum just built and built and built. And I feel like there's more momentum coming again now towards it. But that's kind of different to other countries' focus. So if you think of Estonia, their focus was on sorting out the plumbing and the infrastructure that services are built on, more than perhaps designing for user needs. But it's a sort of different approach. So there's sort of different versions of it, I think.
Do you think it's down to opportunity then? Is it a case that post academia that, well, there's just so many people in the UK, but people had opportunities to sink their teeth into these projects, and it just happened like it was like a perfect storm that government was ready and leadership was ready to accept design into the conversation.
And I think that's true of like when you're building a groundswell of action within an organisation as well. There are opportunities and moments in time that are more suitable than less suitable, probably. So noticing what's going on and sort of, when something big happens, something major happens, that can be an opportunity to kind of pick that up and run with it, or it can be an opportunity to bide one's time and think, okay, let's have a go at this in a few months' time, not right now. But certainly that was like having the right people involved, the right opportunities, the right support, the right permission, the right buy-in from people, the right sort of funding mechanisms, so that it wasn't just a conversation, a nice to have. You need sort of the right power, teeth, strength in order to kind of bring these things about. And I think that was certainly true at that time, and that's has ongoing repercussions, which has been awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, there's two aspects to that. A lot of the people that I've mentioned there who've created so much good for specifically service design and human-centered design across the UK, they all seem to have this fire in the belly, is what I would refer to. And I include you in that as well. And you're like, don't you say that I've got a fire in my belly. But I'm just saying that I think everyone who I know that has done incredible things tends to not just accept the status quo. They have this real kind of, ability to fight the fight, and really become that change maker. And that's the first point. The second point is that one of the things that I can see across the UK since, I don't know, maybe it is 20 years, but it's this act of community within the design community, where everyone seems to kind of know of each other or know someone who knows that someone. Whether it's like the work up in Scotland, like Sarah Drummond, and all the way down to the GDS, it just seems like there's a really nice kind of level of respect that just permeated the community, definitely over the last 20 years. Is that something that has happened with intent, or just happened congruently, like with the movement that we're talking about? Was there anything that you can see, like how did you hear about all of the other designers who are doing all this great work across the UK? Well, what were the vehicles that you used to share knowledge during those times?
Yeah, good question. Oh my God. I wish it would be amazing for someone to go and dig out the history of kind of what groups formed and where things happened as sort of folksonomy or something. I would love to hear about that.
I've done some of this. This is a part of my pseudo research. But go on.
Okay, but this is happening in action.
That's a really good point, Gerry. And I wish somebody had got some notes.
Yeah, hence the podcast. I don't know if it's something about people who are sort of drawn to design and thinking about things tend to be sort of more open or whatever.
Yeah.
As an industry, we, like, all of us build on the shoulders and amazing work of each other. Like, that is definitely the case. Very true of my own work. I remember early on there was a beautiful community meetup called the London IA.
Yeah.
That was run by Matt and Martin, I think. And that started out as just being gathering. They would create talks by interesting people in and around. And just the people that came up and you would get talking to people is probably how I started to know some of the design community, at least in London.
Yeah.
And none of it was not competitive. It was all like, I'm doing this, I'm sharing this, I'm doing, and friendships were made and formed, I think, through that initial meetup. And since then, I think the design community has done really well, probably because of those at the Government Digital Service that put in work developing
100%.
communities. There's one team, Garv, like that was another one set up by Kit and others, I think. But yeah, there seems to be an instinct for it. I have to say, lately I've been branching off and spending more time in communities, like finding out where the operational people meet up, like what are the conferences, what are the events that people go to if you're like running contact centres or you're running frontline staff. Last week I was at the Fast Flow conference, so that's set up by the team topologies community. You look at, we have all these ideas, how do we organise teams to do great work and kind of get it done, particularly where there's a technology element to it, but not only. So I think the same is true of many industries, and if we can sort of bring more people working together, all better. Yeah,
absolutely. I remember, I don't know when this conversation, I was with Sarah Drummond and we were talking about how much happened on Twitter in the early days. And I think there's two particular platforms that I can look at and point at and say Twitter was definitely one, and the other one is an unpopular one. It's Meetup. Whenever Meetup launched in Australia, there was this just spawning happening of these communities every night of the week. And I remember going into Atlassian. I don't know if you know of Atlassian.
Yeah,
they're huge in Australia. They're huge everywhere, but the offices are huge. And they said to us, Atlassian is like a 24-hour pizza shop where you can come in here any day of the week and you'll have a meetup, because they were sponsoring something every single day. Pizza and beer. And as a result, there was this kind of community of people who just went, what time is it? 6 o'clock. We'll go into Atlassian and get pizza and beer, watch a bit of a talk and leave. So it was kind of the antithesis.
Just the thing to do.
Yeah. Who wants to go out and have dinner when you can go and get free pizza and have a beer and have a talk and then just go to the pub? But I don't know what it was about Meetup. But I'm not a big fan of Meetup anymore, but there was definitely a huge amount of value derived from that when it launched in maybe 2011, 2012, around that time. And I can see that the importance of community within the design community in particular, and how it's really paid off dividends in Australia. I can speak firsthand experience there, where people get to know each other and there's more support in the community, and also in the UK. Whereas I just know if I speak to a UK designer, they're going to know several people that I know as well, which is something really nice. And I don't know how it's working now and how it's operating now, but it's something to point back on. And you're right, it would be a really nice kind of reflection piece to read. If somebody out there wants to take it and develop it, I'd love to see it. How all these communities grew and how people got to know each other, because it is really interesting for me when I'm sitting in my attic in Dublin and I speak to you, who we've never met in person, but yet about 5 or 6 of my friends, so I think that's just something kind of special in that,
It really is. And I guess with it comes great responsibility to, not become like a kind of gang, clique. And then forget that others are coming from such different worlds.
100%.
When we're then working with people in organisations. But I don't think we could do the work we do without feeling like you have each other's backs, because you're so often the one person saying, actually, there's something that doesn't seem right about it. Shouldn't we actually go and see those people? No, we should. Like, other companies do that. Like, being the one to challenge is hard. By yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not about the community becoming a tribe, is one of the things that I speak about. It's about like a community actually with a sense of community. Yeah. Like you have to give stuff back to the community. Like, I see this as a community service, this podcast in particular. I bring people on, I help shine a light on people's work. So in the hope that people connect with Kate or connect with whoever else we have here, so they can actually talk about it and stimulate those connections. What can we derive from the success that we're talking about there across, communities that have kind of happened over the last 20 years? And what can we bring that into an organization that's going through that transformation to become more service-led? What can we learn from those pieces?
So something that I notice works really well and try to encourage is the development of communities across different silos, different teams within the organisation. So taking some of the benefits of, goodness, I don't know if you've got to experience this, but there was a brilliant email group. It might still exist today. It's just that I'm no longer inside government. But there was an email group, and before it got hugely big and probably became a Slack channel when Slack came along, there was this email chain, and people would just ask any question and share their work, and immediately it would be of benefit to 10, 20, 30, 40 other people. And it was so amazing. And I think perhaps something about the size of the group, so that so much of the content was directly useful. So if one person was working on a thing, the chances that would be relevant to everybody else.
Yeah. I think Lisa Reichelt mentioned this to me years and years ago.
Yeah. Lisa Reichelt probably set up some of the first ones to do with user research. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was,
I think it was.
Yeah. It was just amazing. And Lisa had an uncanny ability, and it still does, but to just be right on the mark of whatever was going on in my head about, oh gosh, I'm wondering how I'm going to talk about this. She would suddenly write a blog post that's like, here's how you talk about this. And it would just be just ahead of the game with every single thing that she was writing. So there were people like that, but taking some of those things and then putting them in across a whole service or across more of an organization. So it isn't just this special superpower that the design community and research community have amongst themselves, but it's everybody who's interested in getting a passport or this particular kind of a credit card or whatever the thing is, and just trying to break down some of those habits of I talk to my profession, or I'm in operations, so none of my ideas will go anywhere, or here's a whole community that's going to hear you and potentially action things.
I mean, that's been mentioned a few times on this podcast in particular. That whole thing around the email and the scaling of knowledge and the sharing of knowledge, and to quote Lisa's thing, show the thing, share the thing. And it's something that I still kind of practice to this day. I'm like, okay, I've got this work done. It's not going to live on my computer longer than 24 hours and it's up on the wall, and I'm doing something about it. How do you get that kind of buy-in though? If you're working at a local government or, a federal government, say in the States, for example, you're like, we want to set up an email thing, and we're not talking about just replicating, exactly what has happened before. But to do that, the easy solution would be something like a Slack or a Teams channel, or, God forbid, a Confluence or something like that. No disregard to people at Atlassian. If you do want to sponsor this podcast, please email community at thisishcd, only joking. But Confluence is just not a very good tool for what I'm talking about. But if you wanted to do that, typically you'd get a pushback. Okay, so let's use this as a scenario here where you want to try and improve how we're sharing knowledge across an organization, and we want to try and build community. How do you approach that? Because I know people listening to this podcast, and especially on the community on This Is HCD, was one of the questions. What advice would Kate give to try and build that kind of capability within an organization, and how would you go about it?
Yeah, brilliant question. Sometimes you're working in organizations that are quite fearful. There's risk of stuff. They imagine, oh, hang on, what if all of our suppliers get on this thing? What if we invite people that shouldn't have access to information? That sounds, I'm going to react in a fearful way about that very good idea that you're suggesting. So I think part of it is understanding, genuine understanding. Let's assume setting up a Confluence or a Slack channel is a bad idea. Help me just be familiar with why it's a bad idea. This might happen, this might happen, this might happen. So I think starting with genuinely understanding why it might be a bad idea in their, for real, or just in their heads.
Love it.
I think the second thing is, if you're in that kind of organization that has a sort of organ rejection with anything that it doesn't already do.
I love that organ rejection. Oh, I'm stealing that.
Yeah, and because I feel like I need to protect my organisation, so I'm probably coming from the best of intentions with my negativity, but unfortunately, it's also a habit that we need to break out of as well. So I think the second thing is, if you recognise you are in one of those organisations, don't try and say, right, we're going to launch this organisation-wide thing across everybody, and I think it's a good idea, and everyone will, and if you don't think it's a good idea, it's because you don't like sharing, and that's no good.
Yeah.
Recognize read the room, the context you're in, and just start doing things. So, a week note or a fortnight note is a one-way thing from your team to other people. You don't need permission necessarily. You don't have to spread it across the whole organisation. You can start sharing with a few people, and you can improve on that. And then you've got something to point to saying, you found that useful. Wouldn't it be great if that team did something like that too?
Yeah.
So you can sort of start growing the pull for that sort of thing, I think, while understanding the reticence. And then I think through those things, you can come up with, okay, well, what's a nice way of doing it? There will also be, across professions, there will be individuals for whom instinctively this is how people want to do it.
Yeah.
And they come from everywhere. Like, I think as in the design community, we're lucky in that maybe there's a high proportion of people or something. But there are people all over thinking, oh my God, I would love it if we could do this. It's like, well, maybe you can. Shall I just send you a copy of my fortnight note that I'm writing?
Yeah.
Why don't you send one to your team? Just give it a go. If people don't like it, stop doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it can be simple.
I love the fact that you called out the risks at the start. Like, just say, like, let's try and, let's hear the argument against this.
Yeah.
Because that's like the cheat code, what I would call it. I'm like, these are all the pieces that people are going to try and block us on. And then they become design challenges. Okay, well, how can we respond to these things to make sure that we've covered them off? It's
quite funny as well, isn't it, how people kind of are quite good about pulling out the sort of risks and downsides. And I'm pretty good at doing that too, to be fair. But then they don't write out, what are the risks if we don't do this stuff as well? Like, they sort of forget the other list, which is, no, let's carry on. You don't know what I'm doing. You can't ask me for help. I can't show you the thing I'm working on that might have really helped. You don't, like, those are the other downsides that you're fighting for by calling out those risks. So there's something in that. I don't know how you design that conversation. It needs careful design so as not to be antagonistic, but there's something in that, like forgetting that the status quo isn't all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have this thing where when I'm talking about complexity and, complexity within the organization and how we listen is one of the key things. So like, as opposed to listening to win, like, you're trying to listen to understand. And we're really, most of the projects that I find myself involved in, they're not complicated projects, they're complex problems. And I have to try and learn, and I'm always, trust me, I'm very, very impatient, Kate. You should speak to my wife. She'll just be so impatient. But trying to listen to understand is one of the pieces that I have to turn that volume up.
It's a constant habit in all of us. I think it was Chris Voss who wrote, if you find yourself explaining or arguing, you've lost.
Yeah.
Like, understand. Seek to understand. Like, and we all do it. Like, just the other day, someone said, hey, Kay, I've, put this free course together. And they were like, it would be even better if you did this other thing. I'm like, well, the reason I didn't do that is blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, that's what you thought this was about. Excellent. Thank you.
I mean, like, it's something that, like, we're working on the community stuff at the moment, and one of the outcomes that we're trying to derive is like how people can become better designers, and how can they become better designers if they don't do any reflection. So if you do some reflection, and you can have very kind of relatively superficial tools for really being totally honest, like, checklist stuff, but really trying to derive that reflection piece in terms of where our strengths and weaknesses are, and identifying the weaknesses. And I've done it. God knows I've done enough work on myself over the years, and I continue to do it. But I know I'm impatient, and I know my listening skills have to be on 10 when I'm in an organization. Anyone's working at me saying he never shuts up. I'm always talking. But it's one of the skills that I see with some of the best designers that I've ever worked with. They don't always transmit. They're usually just sitting and observing and watching and trying to know when to ask the question. And it's a really interesting point that you've made up, because in that scenario of trying to share knowledge, that is the outcome that we're trying to achieve there by setting up whatever system it is you're going to use. But listening to those potential blockers to what would stop us from achieving that outcome allows us to actually increase the chances of delivering that outcome. And we're all as guilty of it as each other, So talk to me, Kate, around what you're doing now at the moment, because there's a few other areas that I wanted to learn a little bit more about, because what strikes me about you is there's a level of humility around, you don't want to call yourself a service designer. Don't mention it too loud. But what did you study in university? Like, what's your background and sort of thread into where you are now? Like, talk to us about that.
So I subsequently did a master's in human-computer interaction, which was my looking for what is the closest academic-like background that our work can come from.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, sort of my reasons for that were interesting. Originally, I studied geography, which it kind of fit, like, it's back in the late 90s, but it was sort of irrelevant, except that, oh my God, for anyone who studied geography, it gives you a really solid grounding in quantitative and qualitative research.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Which, oh my God, has been so helpful. Like, fear, like no fear about data, no fear about stories, no fear about sense making out of things. So
history as well, like the history and geography is.
Yeah, well, it makes me look at the Peak District in different ways. Just enjoy it. No, but look at the plates, look at the sedimentation.
Absolutely. Like the background to the fabric, everything. Like, I can see geography being a really nice stepping stone to service design. But
it's not as irrelevant as it might sound, I think. But from them, it was early days. We didn't have professions of research, design, things like that, or at least it was probably more graphic design or marketing or maybe strategy was your choices. And I sort of fell in at a bit of the deep end through a series of steps, but I was always working with organisations that did things on the internet in the very early days, just by chance. So I worked for technology companies, gaming companies, I worked for telecoms companies. And one of the first sort of big chunky roles I had was making a telecom service work online. So for the first time, having a registration form to sign up to get your landline services from this, billing, customer support, and I was based in the contact center. So I don't know, we could possibly think of it as a service owner type role now, but it transcended everything, which is probably why I think in these ways now. So I had a number of roles that sort of straddled leadership, operations, design, decision making about pricing, for example. Like we wanted to work with USwitch and others, partnership deals, like the whole lot. And I had several jobs in several different industries, but about that sort of same approach. And it was non-obvious what the role was. It was sort of maker and doer of stuff. And then at some point it was like, human-centered design, if we make the things easy, if we make the things good, if they are compelling, we shouldn't need to spend millions on marketing and sales because it should just kind of work. So that was where my professional interest stepped in. And then I went to do the masters and then spent time in-house and in consultancies and doing freelance work more in human-centered design. And then the last 10 years have been more about leadership, one organisation structure to get this sort of stuff happening by default everywhere more seamlessly.
I'd love to get your thoughts on the leadership side of things, because we identified, the last 20 years, whatever it was in the UK, on leadership having a really important role, like the Francis Maud piece, really giving and elevating design in the conversation to allow, the early people in GDS to make ground, like Sarah and Lisa, and there's a bunch of them that really kicked off that whole piece. But I know people will be listening saying, well, look, I want that in my organization. I want leadership to, be that leader that we want, to become more human-centered, to become, more service-orientated. They want to be able to speak our language, so we don't have to say, this is why research is so important. Like, there's so many people out there that email me saying, what advice do you have on this? What's your perspective on that? Like, if you're working with design leadership, you've written this fantastic book, which, by the way, folks, there's a link in the show notes. Do pick a copy up. It is a fantastic book. But what advice, what would you say to those people who want to try and get the organizational buy-in, the leadership buy-in, whatever you want to say. What steps do you think, if you had to give like a response to people on that email and you had to do 3 bullet points, what would they be?
I think the first is understand the context. You're never going to get a group of very disparate leaders, all with entirely different agendas that kind of come together as often to be entirely behind one thing that's anything, let alone all being united and having a shared view and level of sophistication about what we mean by human-centered design. So firstly, that's not going to happen. Secondly, there are always individuals among that leadership team, among the executive directors, among the non-executives. There will be individuals that have come from other organizations, perhaps where this is much more a default way of thinking or much different. So sort of do the work to find out who those individuals are. Sometimes a non-executive director will come into government. They've had much more commercial experience where that kind of relationship between, if we do right by our customers buy things, is a bit stronger. In other cases, government's far, far ahead of the private sector. So it depends. But there's usually 1 or 2 people who instinctively this works for. So find out who they are, have coffees with them, ask for their advice on how you broker conversations across the organisation, on how you sort of raise awareness, raise understanding. So that's second bullet point.
Okay.
Third bullet point is
dun, dun, dun.
Find the people who, probably couldn't give a fig about human-centered design, don't even know what it means. It's some alien speak. But they've got a major problem or a major pain that would be helped by a more human-centered or service-orientated approach. And don't explain to them what the difference is, but come in and say, okay, you are an operational director. You are being slammed by the number of contacts we're coming in. That's really interesting. I really care about that problem. Can you tell me more? Can we do this? Can we do that? Have you tried this? How would you want to try that? How can I help you get support in order to try that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I mean, it's really refreshing to hear all those different pieces. And someone said to me, I don't know when it was, this is the problem I have, by the way, in the podcast, when you have so many conversations through this medium, there's no sort of unique ways of identifying who said these certain things. But if you're in an organization where you don't have to sell yourself, that should feel somewhat uneasy. For me, I'm more home when I have to try and work and understand. That's the kind of the designer where I am, because I tend to have gravitated towards the work that I kind of have to support them and help them grow at, so the early stages of setting up service design to succeed, which is most of the people who listen to this podcast, they want to try and improve those scenarios. For people interested in this, Kate's book is really fantastic in that pieces around really giving you the practical advice on how to think about the service and within the organization and how to talk about it. What's the key selling points that you have? And I could read it off the back of this, but I'm not going to do that, right? When you say to people why you wrote that book, walk me through the journey on the question that you were hoping to answer by creating it. And also, if you had to write it now in the context of, you probably wrote it 3 years ago and it came out last year, what are the bits you'd like to add to it now that you've learned something more probably since its release?
Yeah, good question. I think I wanted to save people some time and effort and frustration. So all the people who are working on services, be they service designers, be they architects, be they technologists, product managers, whoever they are, that perhaps are newer or less familiar with giant organizations and the sort of baffling but also sensible ways in which they work, how to give practical advice so that everybody can just do some sensible things faster or understand some things better, or at least have a sort of arsenal of things to try out. So I'm not pretending it's a silver bullet. You try this thing, there's 11 chapters, just put those in place and every organization will be magically, amazingly great. There are known things that work. Try them out. See which ones work for your organization. So that was the motivation. And like you, I'm impatient, or rather, I favour efficiency. So don't have everybody struggle with the same things. Like, here are some things that are known, deal with those things, and then pick a load of new stuff, which I haven't thought about, that's hard, and then you focus on those things. So it was a desire for sort of furthering that, I guess. There's also I've spent a lot of time in a lot of different large organisations, and there are some really common things that happen, whether it's government or I work quite a lot with private sector too. There is real commonality. So it's just born of frustration about, let's try and do some things that are sensible to get ourselves out of at least the things we know about, and then there'll be a bunch of new challenges. So it was really, that was the motivation.
There was one point that I'm going to come to there's two questions in the community, but around the metrics within services. When you're working in organizations, you mentioned even public service or private sector, are there any pieces that you want to talk about a little bit further on the metrics that we use to measure our success? Like, one of the key pieces is, from my perspective, is you get a baseline and you try and improve it by the use of our work. But what's your perspective on how to approach those conversations? How do you go about it?
So, well, we've been running a course on how you define success for a service, and it's interesting because I'm not that obsessed with metrics. Like, I'm not scared about numbers, but it's more what it does is give you a common focus so that you can bring lots of different people together to work better together, to sort of move the emphasis. So that's why I'm more into this. And I think people make the mistake of either thinking, well, the only metric that matters is sales, or the only metric that matters is cost cutting, and sort of making the distinction. No, you're trying to get a good outcome here, and then you're trying to measure and manage the time, cost, and effort involved in getting that outcome. So one comes before the other. So I think breaking metrics down on those two parameters, and by outcome I can mean what works for users, what works for the organization. So those two things. And I don't know if you've seen, but just in the last few days I've got a free email course on
I've seen it. I saw it.
The benefits. It's trying to support better conversations. So
put a link to that in the show notes as well.
It's an introduction, but it's around
services.com, isn't it?
How do we have better conversations around why bother doing any of this? So for some people, like, we should be more human-centered. It's like, yes, of course we should. It's instinctive, it's common sense. For others, it's like, yeah, but not at any expense. And for others, it's like, what are you talking about? Actually, that's nothing to do with what we do. My view is something entirely different. So it's about, how do you make the case that is persuasive, compelling, and clear? And even if it's just to support some better conversations, like, that's what it's designed for.
Yeah. One of the pieces that I'm actually working on as a side project is a cost to serve model. So it sits and given away. Like, I demoed it in the This Is HCD community last week to get some feedback and get some people using it.
Great.
So we can get some feedback. And whenever I've presented it at organizations, the eyes go up and they go, ooh. They're like, that is interesting, because organizations, in my perspective, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, they've got a singular perspective on how people are going to get that job done. But I take it from a human-centered perspective in terms of the meandering kind of process that they go through and how much that meandering costs to get the outcome. So it's research-led, but we also have an idea of the time, energy, and focus that it requires from the organization to deliver that outcome. So it's not a case of like reducing the meandering so like people can't meander. It's really just having a metric to understand. But I want to hear your thoughts on, say they have that metric. What advice do you give to organizations where they don't just look at it and say, okay, we need to reduce that cost all the time? So too often it's kind of like austerity in design. Like, they're like, okay, well, cool. If it's €100, let's try and see if we can get it to 95. Let's try and get it so the job is done quicker. And I want to understand your thoughts around that whole kind of perspective of, cutting costs to deliver the outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that's the risk if you present it in isolation and it's the only number that people are focusing on, because you're right, it becomes a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How many staff can we get rid of? How can we make this just happen? And then you inadvertently can cause massive other problems elsewhere. And the worst case is if they're now hidden from your silo, your bit, because you've just shoved the costs and the problems on elsewhere, and you think you've cut costs for yourself, but you've just added them somewhere else. So I think never having that conversation in isolation, especially not for public services, but really for all of them, when it's really important what you're trying to achieve by the service existing.
Yeah.
And I suppose if you kind of break it down, sort of looking across at the whole point of the whole service, and then looking at sort of the different purposes of individual parts. What do you mean by serve? Do you mean get rid of this person? Do you mean get rid of this call?
Yeah.
Or do you mean something quite important has happened? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's it. The other metrics are up for grabs, but the one that, the cost it's having in the organization is one thing, but the cost not to do it this way is when you reframe it. There's lots of other metrics that we can include on that. And I did have another point that I want to try and ask your perspective on, and it slipped my mind, but I'm sure it might come back to me in a minute. Now, I have a question from the community, and for people who are members of the community in this HCD, they get transparency around lots of the interviews that are coming up. And here's a question. I'm just going to move this mic over here. It's from Richard McMurray. Do you know Richard McMurray? He runs the journey management community within the This Is HCD community.
Great.
Questions for Kate. That's plural, by the way, just so you're thinking you're going to get off the hook after one. Number one, what stories do you have when trying to bring clarity to organizations when they are so siloed? Dun, dun, dun. I did put a nice video up there in the community as well of Kate. I think it was UX Brighton, is it? Is it UX Brighton? I don't know where it was. The UX conference. UX Brighton. You're like this.
Oh, yes.
That's the video. And the thumbnail. You're like,
oh, right.
Innovation lessons from service design, Kate. So
that doesn't translate for anyone who's listening, but the odd positions you can find yourself in a video still that then persist on the internet for decades.
I'm actually doing a mimic of Kate's pose in the thumbnail where that
it looked like a sort of fish with arms.
Dare you? I've got no hair. I don't look like a fish. What? So
stories.
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 It's common everywhere, because the minute you're part of a team, you think about that team and you therefore become a silo. So it's not like silos are inherently bad. It's sometimes people try and create silos in order to give a team focus and remove the interference from elsewhere. So it's not all teams and all silos. It's when the people involved actually are part of something that's rather connected, but not seeing it in this way, that is more of a problem. And I think, it's they look at journey management, so they're probably thinking, the kind of the external person trying to do something is the thing that can kind of tend to glue it together. So of course, spend some time thinking about what's going on the outside of our service that then links us all together. And I was having an interesting conversation around, formats of journey maps, service maps, things like that, and making sure that the people involved in the service are sort of owning them, using them. And I was like, it's the knowledge of that people have who are actually involved in the service that's the most important thing, the view that they end up with more than it is anything else. And often the only common, universal piece of software, if that's a thing that you're going to have to end up using after you've put it out on the walls or whatever else you're doing, is often Excel. But the point is, can you do enough that feels like people can kind of see connections, like walking your way through what's actually happening. And I'm reminded of, John Seddon's work and looking at kind of failure demand across and like his approach to the Vanguard method of sort of focusing in on what happens from start to end of a particular case or a particular thing happening through the organisation. But that's often eye-opening if people go and look at it. But not always. Some people have already got a really good grasp of it, actually. What they're not necessarily seeing is how it could work better, or the ultimate effort that lands on somebody else as a result of it. So, or that they've asked for the same thing 6 times. So there are things that are not always visible.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps answer that question.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And second question, again from Richard Murray in this one. What practical tips or plans do you have for making changes in a week or a month? Brackets, taking it from the UX Brighton talk. So, does that make sense to you, that question?
What practical tips
or
to
plans
do what in a week
do
or
you
a month?
have for making changes in a week or a month?
Okay, right. The talk might have like gone into some things that you can do, perhaps.
Yeah. You can cut that one out. You can cut that one out. Look at editors. Cut that bit out. Because that question didn't really make full sense, But is there anything else before we put the edit back in? Anything else you want to focus on before we wrap it
up? You asked me what else I'd put in the book. I didn't answer it at the time. It doesn't matter. But
we'll do that. So just going back to a question that we had there beforehand, where we're saying you wrote the book. You probably wrote it during the pandemic as well, did you? I was thinking, you wrote it during the pandemic. Oh my God. Yeah. It was a therapy book. So you wrote it, came out last year. And what were the thoughts that you had, like, since you released it? What would you change or what would you add to the book now that you've had the benefit of time? What would you add to
it? I'm fairly practically minded, and so if you go to a conference and you have like amazing inspirational ideas talks, and I love them, but I really benefit from when someone goes, do you know what, we made one of these, then we did this, and then we tried that and that didn't work, so then we did this instead and that was really helpful. I'm like, thank you so much. I can sort of lift and work with that and do something with it. So I want the book, and it is it's mostly around that, but I think for like a second edition or another version of it, I would want to get many more real stories from operational teams, from design working within these spaces on ongoing services, so doing continuous stewardship of services. What are the tools, habits, ways of working, very practical things that organizations have got in place? There's a few of those stories in the book, but I would want to double down and bring loads more to life, I think.
It's a really nice way to bring this conversation to a close, because if anyone does want to get in touch with Kate about any of the stories that they're currently experiencing in the organisation that might want to share with Kate, you can do so. What is your website? Is it the Service Org?
theserviceorg.com. Yeah.
This is .com, not .co.uk, which I've commonly entered a few times. So go to the website, and there was another URL, like you mentioned there earlier on, about your email course.
Yeah, silos2services.com.
Great domain. Channels to the domain. I saw it and I was like, great one. Absolutely fantastic. So what can people get out of that email course?
It's the central arguments for how to position being more service orientated. So what's in it for your organization? What outcomes could you get?
Brilliant.
Assuming that doing, designing services that work better for people is not sufficient by itself, what are all of the things that leads to that an organization would be interested in?
Yeah, awesome. Kate, I always wrap up every conversation I have with people by thanking them for their time, their energy, and their vulnerability ultimately being put on the spot and being recorded doing so as well. And so I really, 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 really enjoyed speaking with you this morning. If people want to connect with you on LinkedIn, do you accept, LinkedIn connection requests like that? You do?
Yeah.
So people connect with Kate and
Blue Sky as well.
Blue Sky. What's Blue Sky?
It's like where lots of designery people, particularly in the UK government, have been moving to in place of X. So it's become this kind of quite lovely, magical community.
So it's called Blue Sky.
Like the early days of Twitter.
Okay, yeah. Might have to set an account up over there and bombard people with podcast links. I'll be blocked by the end of the day.
Definitely do that.
Kate, listen, look, thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun, and best of luck with any of the work that you're doing at the moment. And if you do get a second edition of the service organisation, you're always welcome to come back on the show.
Wonderful. It's been a pleasure, Gerry. Thanks so much. I'll see you soon.
Hopefully.